The world of sports puts players in a lot of high-leverage situations that can cause tempers to flare. The NBA is perhaps the most infamous sport when it comes to fighting outside of the boxing ring. These are times NBA players lose their cool on the court. Some of the most influential NBA players existed in the 80s, and as legendary as they weren't perfect. They lost their cool a whole lot more than today's NBA players. For example, Julius Erving and Larry Bird. In the early 1980s, the Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers ran the Eastern Conference. One of them represented the East in every NBA Finals between 1980 and 1987, often after ousting the other. The rivalry was approaching its last leg in 1984, but it still had enough juice to spark a dramatic confrontation between two of the league's marquee talents, Julius Erving and Larry Bird, during a November 9th, 1984 matchup. Erving explained what happened during an interview on ESPN's Get Up. So the fight, actually there was an offensive foul called on Larry. He didn't like the call, so he was really mad at the referee, and he came down court and he was kind of stomping. He was in front of his bench, and it looked like a moment in which he was going to take a swing. It was very uncharacteristic because, we did Converse commercials together. We did Spalding commercials together, so we were kind of cool, but I thought something was going to happen because he was definitely mad. But he was mad at the referee. He wasn't mad at me. I just extended my arm to hold him back, and it ended up sliding up to his neck. And it was on, so it was really inadvertent. I didn't really mean to grab him by the neck. I pushed him in the chest and slid up, got to his neck. He reached for my neck. Next thing I know, it's a melee. Bird and Erving threw punches. Moses Malone scuffled with ML Carr. The bench is emptied. At one point, there was a pile of players on the floor. Total chaos. Referee Dick Bavetta, who was forced into solo duty after his partner Jack Madden left with a knee injury, did what he could to restore order, but how could you ever stop players of that stature by yourself? In all, 18 players were fined for the fight, 17 players and 76ers coach Billy Cunningham. Erving and Bird were the hardest hit with $7,500 fines, the second largest in NBA history at the time. Next up, we got the fight between the Knicks and the Suns. Rivalries can get real personal in the court with these two teams. It started as a measuring stick matchup between the run-and-gun Phoenix Suns and the slow, physical, defense-first New York Knicks. It ended with a runaway 121-92 win for the Suns. The night of March 23, 1993 devolved into a bench-clearing brawl that resulted in 6 ejections, 12 technical fouls, and ultimately league rule changes that increased the penalties for fighting and leaving the bench during a fight. An escalating battle between Knicks point guard Doc Rivers and Suns point guard Kevin Johnson boiled over right before halftime. The two exchanged words after Johnson deflected an inbounds pass. Later, on the ensuing pass, Rivers bumped Johnson, who embellished the contact and drew a whistle. Rivers got in the official's face first, then he went chest to chest with Johnson. The bench is cleared, but things calmed down before anything got out of hand, or so it seemed. On the next possession, Rivers drew a charge on Johnson and let him hear about it. When the Knicks got it back, Rivers went to screen Johnson, and the Suns point guard lowered his shoulder and planted it into Rivers' chest. Rivers got back to his feet and raced over to Johnson as the halftime buzzer sounded, with players and coaches from both clubs crowding around them. Even Greg Anthony, who was sidelined with an ankle injury and in street clothes, came over from the bench to exchange words with Johnson and punched him in the face. Those two went to the floor with a dog pile on top of them. Knicks head coach Pat Riley emerged with his pants ripped. Nobody was safe that night, and it resulted in some massive changes for the league. Number 3, the old heads aren't the only ones that went at it back in the day. During their earlier years in the league, some of today's veterans went at it a few times as well. December 16, 2006 might have been the NBA's brawl to end all brawls. May not have been the most infamous fight, and it's not the most brutal of all time, but it had ugly moments, and the league's punishments against the participants effectively removed any more fighting from the sport. It all started with a hard foul in the final seconds of a blowout home loss for the New York Knicks. They were livid that the Denver Nuggets still had their starters on the floor. Knicks head coach Isaiah Thomas told Carmelo Anthony that he and Marcus Camby shouldn't have been in the game and not to go into the paint. Thomas Thomas said. "It wouldn't be a good idea for you to rub it in and go to the basket and dunk it on our guys." Thomas subbed in Marty Collins, who flagrantly fouled J.R. Smith shortly thereafter. Smith was en route to an easy transition score when Collins grabbed him by the neck and took him to the floor. Smith got up and immediately started jawing at Collins. Nate Robinson got in Smith's face, Anthony shoved Robinson, who got tangled up with Smith, and the two spilled into the stands while wrestling. As things seemed to be settling, Anthony floored Collins with a punch. Jared Jeffries chased Anthony to near half court before he was tackled by a Denver player. Smith was on the opposite end of the court from where the fight started before security finally contained him. It was mayhem, the kind of mayhem the NBA felt it could not afford roughly 2 years removed from the malice at the Palace. We'll get to there too. So NBA Commissioner David Stern came down with a sledgehammer and suspended 7 players for a total of 47 games, including Anthony, the league's leading scorer at the time, for 15 games. 4. Malice at the Palace. Everyone has heard of this fight. It's the NBA's most famous blemish. In November 19, 2004, game between the Indiana Pacers and Detroit Pistons was less than a minute from its completion when a hard foul became a shoving match. That shoving match then became the most infamous brawl in basketball's history. Pistons big man Ben Wallace attempted a layup when Ron Artest, better known as Meta World Peace, fouled him hard. Wallace shoved Artest, both teams confronted each other at midcourt, and the benches emptied. Artest laid on the scorer's table, and then a fan threw a beer from the stands and hit him. The Pacers' swingman raced into the stands, sparking a scary, ugly fight between players and fans that stretched from the seats to the court, spanned the longest 2 minutes in NBA history. Pacers special assistant to the CEO, Chuck Person, told Jonathan Abrams, "Felt like we were trapped in a gladiator-type scene where the fans were the lions and we were just trying to escape with our lives. That's how it felt, that there was no exit, that you had to fight your way out." There were legal repercussions for players and fans. The league levied suspensions that totaled 146 games and $10 million in forfeited paychecks. The NBA also revised arena policies regarding security and alcohol sales. It was the worst kind of chaos imaginable. It has been the NBA's goal since then to prevent brawls of that nature from ever coming around again. Lastly, we got the punch. With one punch, the sports world was changed forever. The night of December 9th, 1977 brought about an otherwise anonymous contest between the Houston Rockets and Los Angeles Lakers, but it took an ugly, violent turn in an opening minute of the second half. LA's Kermit Washington and Houston's Kevin Kernert jostled while trailing a Rockets fast break. The two suddenly traded punches, and the Washington's teammate Kareem Abdul-Jabbar intervened by grabbing Kernert. Seeing this from afar, Rockets captain Rudy Tomjanovich raced toward the action. Washington saw Tomjanovich and his peripheral vision stopped, turned, planted, and punched him square in the face. The blow was nearly fatal. Tomjanovich was hurried to an emergency room where he was told he might not survive. Chris Cobbs wrote for the Los Angeles Times in 1985. Total damage done included a fractured skull, broken jaw, broken nose, other facial injuries, and leakage of spinal fluid. Washington was suspended for 60 days without pay and fined $10,000. Tomjanovich didn't suit up again that season, though he returned in 1978-79 to make the 5th All-Star appearance of his career. You can't discuss violence in any sport without thinking about what happened between Rudy and Kermit, the late David Stern told Cobbs. It crystallized and focused and forever emblazoned the consciousness of all athletes what can happen